doing some things, but they don't seem to worry as much as we do. This doesn't mean that it's their state of life, because I can go 25 miles away and find another group that lives in similar circumstances with very different values. And they don't seem to have all the things to teach us that I've learned from the Pitaha. They have other lessons. So there really is something in diversity. To me, the biggest lesson is diversity. If you're sitting in a room with people who all look like you and dress like you, you're not going to learn much. If they all look different from you, or they're different genders, different ethnic backgrounds, different economic backgrounds, you're much more likely to learn things about life that you didn't know before. And what greater diversity is there than to go to the middle of the jungle and live with a people that's had very little or no outside contact, to learn to speak their language, and to really try to construct a knowledge of how they make it through the world. I went as an evangelical missionary and am now an atheist, and that is owing to the Pitaha's effects in my life.
Sarah, you were talking about the benefits of modern technology, the modern world, but isn't there an argument to say that that's contributed to what Daniel was talking about? Well, we're almost all the same now. We don't have the differences.
I don't think I would say that we're all the same. Technology gives us ways to express our differences. It also makes us realize how big the world is, and when you potentially can make contact with far more of the 7 billion people out there, you realize there are more people who are like you than you think, but perhaps that's a good thing. So if we look at the way that the internet has enabled minority communities to mobilize and to find other people who are like them, I'd say that's a very good thing. So, of course, it is good that there's diversity in the world, but realizing the value of that diversity relies on being able to travel to different places, experience different ways of life. If we all lived in these tiny, isolated communities and there was no exchange, we'd actually lose diversity, we'd lose the benefit of that experience.
But don't I end up being a member of this new tribe without ever leaving my home, without ever leaving my room?
So I have not spent years in the Amazon, but I've spent a couple of months in the Amazon living without electricity, running water, etc. And I will tell you that being there is not the same as seeing it on the internet.
Janet, you touched upon this idea that there's this almost innate longing. But is it a longing for a real past, or is it a longing for a romanticised version?
I think it's always a romanticised version, and that's what gets worrying about people who make too rapid an inference from where we are now and our angst to some primitive society, because it isn't based on anything that they would exchange if they had seen it and known what it was like. But I think the whole idea that there is an ideal way of living is an extraordinary one. I mean, there may be some that are better than others, but my guess is that whatever situation people are in, they have ideas of better things. Can you tell us, you practical experts, whether this is true?
I can say about the Pitaha that they are unique among hunter-gatherers in the Amazon that I'm aware of, in that they have no desire for our technological goods. They're familiar with technology through me, and motorboats are easier to navigate the river with than paddling canoes, but they don't want my motorboat. They really don't show any desire to acquire those things, which I will say that in other hunter-gatherers, that is not the case. They do want these things, and with them comes unhappiness, not because the technology itself brings unhappiness, but because they learn to rely on something they do not have the economics to support. Whereas the Pitaha's rejection of technology has made them happier, not because they've rejected technology, but because they haven't become, in their own minds, poor. And so they don't have a concept of poverty, which is a very unusual experience.
That sounds a bit like some of those American religious communities, the Amish and the Hutterites and people. They seem to be very happy.
In my experience, there's many groups that as soon as they're exposed to more technologically advanced way of life. They become slightly insecure, they all rush to it, especially the children. They have a great desire for it, and often within one generation, everything will change. Often as well, very sadly, thereafter, they realise that they haven't got the means to support themselves anymore. They end up having to go to the city, join the country. And that's a very difficult route for a lot of those groups. Other groups that I've come across, like there's one particularly in the Polynesian island that only had one boat a year, and so their journey into the modern world was much slower, and slow enough that actually a number of the youngsters who went into the city of the bigger island would come back and say, no, slow down, actually what we've got is amazing, you've got to go there and see it, but let's not all change straight away. And I think that that's really telling to me. It shows that actually once you really get into our society, a lot of these groups realise that what they do have is actually very special, and that speaks to me.
Daniel, can I ask you, if we look at a practical sort of question, what is it that we could realistically take from some of these tribal peoples?
I think that the sense of personal self-sufficiency, not that we don't have it in our society, but every Piraha knows what they need to do to survive, and they're confident in that ability. Their ability to regularly choose to undergo hunger because they want to keep their bodies hard, matters of personal discipline, because it makes them more effective hunters. But I think the main thing is something that Bruce alluded to earlier, which is the openness with emotions and the ability to express themselves without inhibitions. And this is a view of the Piraha almost exclusively, but in this particular group, the ability to talk about things without euphemisms, I can give lots of examples that are humorous, but to know how everyone else is doing, to know your neighbor and know that if they are behaving abnormally today, there's probably a problem, and taking care in a sense of responsibility for themselves. Along with that self-sufficiency comes responsibility for your fellow people.
How can we actually achieve that? Because that sounds almost as though we have to remake ourselves.
In a sense, we don't have to become tribal folks to do that. I mean, I enjoy living in the jungle. I also enjoy five-star hotels. So I don't believe that living simply alone is the key to it. But as was alluded to earlier, I think Janet said that we all have roughly the same number of friends. And what do we do for our friends? What responsibility do we take to them? I think that even our lifestyle today, which I don't criticize as inherently wrong, allows us more space for self-sufficiency and caring for others than we take. So the problems to me are not in technology. The fact that someone spends all day long on computer games is not going to make them a better person, I don't believe. But
do you think it might make them a worse person?
I have a good friend of mine whose son just failed out of college because of computer games. So in that particular case, since I think college matters, I don't think it was advantageous to them. But it's not the fault of the existence of computer games. It's the choice to play them all day long. I think that's the problem. I mean, you could say the same thing as if you read great literature all day. That probably is, you need to vary your experiences a little more.
But if you say college matters, college is a result of a complex society that produces surpluses and involves division of labour.
The only reason that we are able to be up here is because farmers produce enough food so that we don't have to be farmers, and we don't have to be hunter-gatherers. So the minute that I've never been tempted to spend the rest of my life, although I've spent the majority of my adult life with hunter-gatherers, I still enjoy the times when I come out. But that doesn't negate the lessons I get from them while I'm there and how I can apply that in my life. So it's not me trying to go native necessarily, although I think the experience of doing that is transformative, even if it's just for a brief period of time, to live in a completely different way, to experience let your body experience hardships that it wouldn't perhaps normally experience. So the lessons don't depend on us becoming hunter-gatherers.
Although, just to add to that, in my own personal experience, and I have to be careful how I describe this because I don't want to put myself on a pedestal that I'm desperately going to fall off at a later stage. But I have chosen actually to change my lifestyle as a result of the lessons that I've learned. I have been not only living with many indigenous peoples around the world, I also have the horror and privilege of going to see lots of environmental destruction zones and things like that. And it's become increasingly aware to me that nearly everything that I do in this very complex society is having a detrimental effect, but in many ways. And not only to the environment and to the air and the water, but also to these wonderful people who've brought me into their homes and called me their brother, sister, and son. And so it's become very evident to me that although I have enjoyed my luxuries, I've also realized that they come at a great cost. And that, over time, has meant that I don't enjoy them anymore. And so, not because I want to go and sleep in sackcloth, but I actually feel that it is my own destiny to probably reduce my carbon footprint, reduce the way that I live my life. And also what's become really evident and really surprising to me is that I'm becoming happier as I do it. And that was a shock. And I'm not there, and I'm still very human, and don't take me at my word if you see me flying another day. But that's the direction that I plan to go, and I'm feeling so much better for it.
Sarah, how does that match up then with your sort of question about what is the good life? Because it sounds to me as though Bruce is describing something that quite a lot of people would think comes pretty close to an idea of what a good life is.
So there's this idea, I guess, that even though we are, you would say our lives are much, much better than the lives of humans were 200 or 500 years ago because we have all of these benefits, why aren't we any happier? And there's a theory out there that our capacity for well-being is sort of set at a given level, and a new, some new technology or some new advance can make us temporarily happier, but then over time we'll sort of revert to the same base level. And then you have to say, well, is there any point trying to strive for progress? Is it even progress if we're all sort of doomed to return to the same level? So some people have called this a paradox. I'm not really sure how you answer that, except to say that we may not get any happier over time with these incremental additions, but I think we can imagine we'd feel a lot worse if we suddenly had them taken away from us. I guess the other thing I would say is that well-being is very complex, so it's not simply a matter of happiness. If it were just happiness, we would all take soma or be lotus eaters and have this forever happy daydream but never really do anything with our lives. And so one thing that's very important is our freedom to pursue different conceptions of the good life, be they through trying to reduce our consumption to aim towards a sustainable future, to sometimes enjoy 5-star hotels, to revel in the difference and the lessons that we learn when we go and spend time, be it weeks or months or years, in different environments. So that freedom to choose for ourselves and to try and pursue that is what's important to us.
Well, Janet, we were talking about well-being.